Hello, everybody. I'm sorry that we cannot meet today in face-to-face setting, but we will manage. I am Murumaa-Mengel, and I work as an associate professor of media studies at our institute. I do believe that we have met with at least some of you in different settings, but for some of you, I'm an unknown entity. So hello, it's nice to meet you. We will have a chance to meet when we talk about intimate publics, I think, and also when you're presenting your work. But today we will meet in these kinds of indirect and mediated ways. So you have read two papers. Hopefully, you found them to be exciting. Hopefully, you found them to be useful in your work, in your essays, in your final thesis, in your projects, in thinking about the world. So today I will be, in this video lecture, I will be going through some of the important points that I would love to be something that you take away from this course, but we will be talking about networked and refracted publics. In broad characteristics that you already got from the papers, but I will try to give you lots and lots of examples from the studies that we have carried out here. So I will provide on the slides as well some discussion points. So you can kind of stop me, push the pause on this video, and just think about stuff. Or if you're watching this with someone, which is also an awesome idea to go through study materials, just put it on pause and have a quick chat with your course mate or whoever is watching this video. Hello. But yeah, so we will be talking about network publics and we will be talking about refracted publics. The studies that I'm bringing examples from, they are from several different ones that we have carried out over the years. So there is one cool study that we did with our master's student, Liisi Maria Muuli, about misogynist content shaming pages of Instagram. There is one study that is yet to be published. It's in review that centers around the shaming groups of Facebook with our alumni Karel Lott. And also, I think that I will probably bring some examples from the field of influencers and the research that we have carried out over the past 10 years about that topic. And also, I cannot escape my PhD thesis, which was about imagined audiences. So the people that we imagine to be the recipients of our messages, very often they're not the same. Spoiler alert there. So let's get going. I think that this video is probably going to be a little bit over an hour and a half maximum. So, but if you take time and have discussions with your self or with your peers, then it's going to take longer. So we shall see. You will have plenty of time to do the participatory points, getting task, and you should have enough time to go through all of this. All feedback is very welcome. So please, if you found something to be extra confusing or you found something to be very motivating, then email me, maria.muruma@ut.ee. I will be happy to read your emails and be in contact in that kind of asynchronous way. Or we can chat, later on during the course. So let's get going. First, I want to ask you and not get any answers, right? But just take a moment and think about the text that you have read. Dana Boyd about network publics and Crystal Abidin about refracted publics. Yeah, you can pause that. Just think about them. A personal view. I really like these texts. I found them to be very helpful when I was trying to figure out how to theoretically ground my studies and how to make sense and kind of categorize the different characteristics of online settings. The social media, for example, my field of research is very often social media, and I wanted to kind of understand how can I analyze this? Because it's such a vast field, right? And I found Dana Boyd's network publics related writings just around the time that I was doing my master's. So my master's thesis was about perceived audiences once again. And I kind of knew that Dana Boyd was this top shark on this field and a very influential scholar and a thinker. So I read lots of stuff that she had written. And I found this concept of network publics in its simplicity, in its like really abstract form, to be very comforting. That it was really like a usable theory for me that I could build empirical materials on. And also, lately, Crystal Abidin is a really sharp writer who has a knack for giving theoretical terms a really catchy kind of label, the name of it, and she has a really brilliant mind. So that's why I really liked, and I was happy to find that she had taken on Dana Boyd's well-established concept of network publics and then moved on with it, just like making adjustments to it, saying that no, yeah, network publics is great and all, but there is something more going on. It's not the whole story. So that's why I was pretty excited to get these two texts out to you as well. And I hope that something kind of clicked in your head as well, whether you're thinking about, I don't know, animal influencers, or you're thinking about the ventilation chat groups that we might have, or you think about work-related kind of business-to-business networks that you inhabit, or you try to make sense of why teenagers are like that on TikTok, or, you know, it doesn't even matter what you're thinking about. If it has this kind of digital online component, then I'm really hoping that these two texts will not be just texts that you have read for a seminar or for a lecture, but rather something that you can actually use. So some more things to think about in terms of general impressions. And normally we would talk about this in group, but now you're stuck with me on the screen and hopefully some course mates. But some things to think about when you're reflecting and looking back on reading these texts is that, did you recognize yourself in these texts? Like, were you at some points reading the text and be like, oh, but that's me. Oh, I'm a part of such publics. I haven't thought about that. Oh, but I am. So recognize these moments when you're interacting with these academic texts, and then they will become usable. Because, you know, knowledge building is very often you need an anchor to kind of get you hooked on the new topic, and then you can build on that. I also always invite, when we're talking about like new media studies, to think about how old are the texts that we're reading. Are they theoretical and can stand the test of time, or are they more empirical and thus they get old in a sense? Like a MySpace study today gets them eyes rolling and everybody's like, why are we reading this? Although the conceptual, the theoretical, the abstract thoughts behind this MySpace study could be really relevant. So I ask you, was this 2010 text still relevant to you? Or did you go sometimes like, yeah, that was the old internet, But now, so I'm not obviously hoping for my camera to give me answers now, but I would be really interested to know, how did this text feel to you? And this is also from a teacher's point of view, rather important point, because very often our students say to us, why are you letting me read these really old things, like something from the 90s, or worse even, like from the 70s or 50s? Oh dear, why? The world has changed, the media has changed. Sometimes it hasn't. Sometimes the core functions, it doesn't even matter what the platform is or what's the latest trend or craze or whatever. Sometimes the underlying mechanics of it all stay the same for 100 years or more even. And that's the trick, that you learn to read the texts from two levels. One, on the very empirical, this moment in time kind of, the context of it all. But then the other one is like, is this stuff still usable? Are these thoughts still applicable to new environments, to new practices, to new kind of norms that might have developed? Or is this to be contested? So keep that in mind whenever you're reading stuff. And sometimes when you get to read really like old stuff and you're wondering, why did we read this old stuff? Perhaps there's been a secret mission from the lecturer. It might be. Also, general impressions round is good to reflect on, how useful are these concepts? Like, can you take the concept of refracted publics and make this a theoretical framework for your final task on this course? Or could you take networked publics and use it for a new campaign that you're designing at your work site? Or could you do something with a specific thing in these theories, like silo sociality concept, and use this in a beneficial way in fighting the information disorders coming from Kreml? Or could you perhaps build a school curricula part around the core concepts of networked publics in media and information literacies building activities? So try to think about, would these texts, hardcore academic texts, be useful in other settings, in academic settings, but also professional settings, perhaps even in very personal settings? And also, with that comes the request to try to tie these concepts to other practices, to other theoretical concepts, similar things, perhaps something from the linguistics, something from the biogenetics, something from, whatever your favorite other field is. So try to see what is common, what is different, what complements certain practices or theories that you have already had contact with. Yeah, you're good to put it on a pause and kind of think about these things, not to rush through things, because that's probably something that you have already talked about in some courses. But one of our institute's favorite theories to work on is the concept of acceleration of social time. And one of the kind of underlying big topics is the slow movement, how we have become so rapid and so quick and fast paced in our everyday life that some activities like learning are very hard to do in these settings. So taking time, keeping your mind, even if you want to multitask and you're like, Maria, it's been too long, you're still talking about self-reflection and like the core of the text, like, no, switch it up. You kind of discipline yourself and try to stick with it. So slow movement, not just slow food, slow fashion, but also slow thinking, slow learning is perhaps something to look into. So you probably noticed, but I want to draw attention to that. that when we talk about contemporary online publics and we try to look through the lens of either networked or refracted publics, then there tends to be this kind of tilt that networked publics are very much about the structure of how things are built up, how social relationships work, what are the norms, how the architecture of this all, how the infrastructure is built up, what is the affordance of technology. And then refracted publics are like leaning towards agency-centered behaviors and practices. So people's own choices, people's playfulness, this kind of innovation in, aha, you designed this platform to do this, but I'm going to use it differently. So this kind of, this way of being empowered and doing things in your own way, and not technology shaping the human, but rather the human shaping technology kind of way. So I don't know, did you notice similar things? Because this is probably also useful to keep in mind if you want to use these theories in analyzing people's behavior and how social media communication, for example, takes place. So if you want to focus on the structure of things, then perhaps networked publics is a more useful concept. And if you want to talk about people's agency and how they invent things, then perhaps refracted publics is like more suitable in a very general way. Not to say that, you can't go crisscross there. But just to remind you, networked publics is described to be this kind of sort of mediated publics that where material that is posted, created, shared, collaborated on is very often persistent. It's archived. All of these campaigns of think before you post. Once it's out there, you'll never get rid of it, and all of that kind of stuff. These messages echo that characteristic of networked publics. Also, quite similarly, that the content is replicable. It's fairly easy to screenshot stuff. It's really easy to copy stuff. It's there's no boundaries these days in copying things. And it is the age of screenshots. This kind of snap, even like uncropped images where you can see the battery line and all of these kind of little things that people's phones have it's become a customary to just leave them on and just share these full screen shots to whoever wants to see them. So this is a part of networked publics, that kind of characteristic that allows us to do certain stuff and inhibits and doesn't allow us to do other kind of stuff. Content is searchable. So, it's fairly easy to find information, to find a certain piece of information that is circling out there, especially when we compare to pre-internet times. It's become really, really, really simple to do that. So this kind of learn to Google principle is rather important. So yeah, search skills and being able to navigate this mass of information has become crucial in network publics. And also that information and communication practices are scalable and they are really visible. And there's always this kind of potential to go viral, to reach beyond the intended publics, the intended audiences. So networked publics tend to be this big other omnopticon kind of structure where everybody is looking at everybody and we are participating in this mutual surveillance where we keep an eye on each other and we copy stuff and we share stuff, and information is just like doubled, tripled, quadrupled in really, really quick terms and really vast spaces. But refracted publics exist right next to that structure, within that structure, interwoven with all of that we just talked about. So refracted publics are existing in parallel, in complement to networked publics. So it's not a matter of either or, but rather they are coming together. There's both. So refracted publics are more about transient communication. So you will have this kind of, yes, it's out there, but it's unrecognizable. It's just, chilling there somewhere in the spheres. It's not catchable. It's there one moment, away in another. It's the kind of story format there only for certain hours or even certain minutes. This kind of snaps of moments that are just gone the next. Obviously, not really gone, but gone from the organized, archived part of the publics. So that also means that it's really easy to do info burials. So if you're interested in, getting this one very specific piece of information drowned or flooded, you just have to put out lots and lots of different information that makes it kind of disappear in that sea of info disorders. In refracted publics, information and content is discoverable, which means that it goes under the radar. So you have to stumble upon it or know where to look at to find it. So that means that we're working with very specific communities, we're working with very specific formats, double-coded, triple-coded, this really like all over the place, kind of nooks and corners where you have to know where to look or just be lucky or unlucky, depending on the content, to stumble upon that. Also, refracted publics are described to be very much about decodability, meaning that whoever sends the message doesn't send out a clear message, but it's coded in several layers of meaning, these kind of backtrackability vectors, or just this intertextuality, hints and clues. And you have to know a lot. You have to have this kind of cultural literacy that comes with being a part of a community, for example, to be able to understand these messages. So think about memes, for example. Very often you're looking at a meme or a trend or something that is, hot and popping at this moment, and you're like, what? Why is there a pineapple? Like, what is it? I don't understand anything. And that means that you don't have the glasses, you don't not have the knowledge, the background kind of literacy to understand that, to decode that in a way that allows you to understand the meaning. And that's really something that I have noticed in my studies for over the past 15 years or more even, that youth cultures tend to use these heavily coded messages and means of communication in order to escape and give themselves some privacy from the spying eyes of parents and people of power. So, because the online spaces have taught us over the years that, well, you have to self-censor a lot, and please don't post much, and it's super dangerous to be out there, and there are bad people everywhere trying to take advantage of you. And this is actually a very scary kind of message to give to young people, because they have to live their lives on social media. I'm really sorry to burst your bubble here if you want to argue with me, but yeah, life without social media is possible. Obviously, you can have a really rich life without it, but youth cultures of today are very often built on the you know, this kind of norm that you're available there. You're in the loop. You understand how things work. You know the trends, you know the memes. You can be a part of us and not be a part of them who don't know. So if we as grown-ups are really quick to jump in and be like, oh, but this is pointless, this is not real communication, go play outside and do real stuff, then we are actually overlooking the fact that this is real. Everything that is happening in online spaces is real, and it's affecting people's lives, mental health, relationships, and all of that kind of stuff. I probably don't have to tell you that, but just in case that there are some people who are like, but I wanted to put that in. So yeah, youth cultures especially, but now obviously not just youth cultures, have learned to hide the meaning. They have to be in rather public spaces where they are always stalked on and they are snooped on. So they have to develop these secret languages in order to give themselves some privacy in this really visible, really public, potentially always discoverable, scalable, visible, searchable, replicable, persistent, archived kind of life in these network publics. So they are carving out these private areas in that network publics, and they're making these refracted public places. And silo sociality, which is something that is really relevant now when we think about how, for example, in Estonia, still Facebook is really important as a platform, but Facebook use has turned very much towards group-based use of social media. So people go to Facebook because they belong to certain mass groups and they get several uses and gratifications out of participating in these groups. Which also comes with this kind of info bubble, echo chamber kind of structure. So I hope that these make it really visible from my side, how I'm attaching these theoretical concepts to real life situations. And I will be happy to hear about like what kind of connections did you make? What was your theory is usable moment? Because I know that if you have been away from academic life and if you have just gotten into this discipline, it can be really confusing. Like, okay, there are these big words and really like awfully difficult ways of expressing oneself in theoretical writings. But it's actually very usable once you get to know the lingo. So words of comfort here for those who might feel a bit lost. Let's move on. So, but imagine that I was an evil person, which I sometimes am, but not today, Satan. But imagine that I would make you choose that, is it network publics or is it refracted publics? Like choose one. What would you choose? What is your online life like? Is it more framed by the concept of network publics? Or do you see yourself hanging out in spaces, doing your thing, you know, just like inhabiting these places that are described by refracted publics more? Probably you can think about both, but which one is dominating? Because people's media worlds and life worlds are very, very different. So one could describe very secret places, like the back channels of 4chan or something like that. But somebody would say that, well, I do all of my organization's social media that is really public and it depends on the networkability of structures. So we could have very different practices appearing here if we could have a common discussion. But yeah, the problem very often, because we start to think about structure and we start to think about these publics whenever there's a problem, right? So the problem very often arises when context collapse. Context collapse is another term that is coined by Dana Boyd, who has already made an appearance. And context collapse means that social life and communication is very often, you know, divided into these little nice boxes and context. So for example, here talking to you, I am one person. I am following a certain etiquette. I'm, you know, taking into consideration my role prescriptions. How am I supposed to behave? But if I end this and go and have a chat with my child, for example, I'm another person. If I go after a really shitty work week and just ventilate and just like rah, rah, get it out there with my friends, I'm another person. If I go to my child's school and have development mm, interviews, whatever they are, once a year, then I'm another person. You know, from situation to situation, you are very different. And that's okay. We always have been. We are these social chameleons that you see on the slide here as well, that are this kind of shapeshifters and skin color changers, and we adapt to however the situation needs us to be. So this is like normal for us. Not one man, one identity, you know, you go, you're the same for everybody. Everybody gets the same person. I'm authentic. We are authentic, but we are authentic in a million different ways. It's not just a clear-cut thing. Like, for example, think about the jokes that you make. Some jokes are okay with your family. Some jokes are okay with your childhood friends. Some jokes are okay with your, I don't know, 7-year-old child. Some jokes are okay when you're giving a class. Some jokes are, you know, you can continue. But in online settings, we are often left with this context collapse that everything kind of falls together. And you have to be one man, one identity to everybody who is there. And it's super hard because everybody has a million different norms, a million different expectations about how you should behave, how you should be, which rules can be bended, which rules can be broken, which cannot. A sense of humor is a very difficult thing, right? So the problem is that we are put into these social situations where communication takes place, but we don't have scripts. We don't see who is there in our audience. So we become these sad chameleons who have to be this kind of gray things to not offend anyone, to kind of be acceptable by all, which is very difficult, you know. So that can make us really unhappy. Also, we're not really good at that. We're not good at being liked by everyone, because whenever you're posting something, whenever you're creating content, you are alienating a certain piece of, you know, a part of your audience, and you are hitting it home with, you know, a certain part of audiences. So in that sense, when we are communicating and actively sharing information on these online spaces, online platforms, we are dealing with nightmare mass audiences. And nightmare audience is this concept that I will return to, but usually they are the people that we're not actually thinking about when we're sending out stuff. We're like, oh, right, they can see it too. These are the nightmare audiences. But several really old concepts are very useful here. For example, Goffman has been used widely. Check out the year number, the date here, right? So Goffman's theatrical approaches to social life and the concepts of front stage and backstage, for example, have been used widely when talking about influencers and how they create authenticity and how they present themselves, and why are we watching random people like really for years, for example, why are we following them? So Goffman has been used here very much. Or the chameleon metaphor is actually obviously loaned from somebody, from Gergen, who has written very bold and very insightful stuff already in 2000. So check it out if you want to. I found myself to be going ooh, when I was reading Gergen's essays, mostly, not empirical studies, but they were these kind of theoretical essay pieces, and they were really, really good. But yeah, we should ask ourselves, what happens when all of our social contexts are like mushed together? We have to talk to everybody at the same time. And obviously, you can do like friend circles and choose and pick and use several different accounts. And these are all, great strategies that people use. But mostly, we're too lazy for that. We can't be bothered. The kind of like the trade-off, time, energy spent on personalizing all of these circles and who gets to see what, and handling 3 different accounts and then posting and keeping track, where are you, what kind of person. It's exhausting. And that's why 95% of people, and that's like from the top of my head, there's no study that can measure that, but there are around 90% of the people don't actually think about things too much. I wonder if there is a study about that, how many people present themselves in a one man, one identity kind of way, and who handle and curate very different, very specific accounts. Perhaps now, though, things have changed. 90% might be an overstatement, I'm thinking, because several professions, for example, rely on the presence of social media. So we have lots of doctor accounts, teacher accounts, this kind of professional me in a different corner. Yeah, so we could argue about this. I have a feeling that 90 was very too much. Perhaps let's say like 70% of people can't be bothered. Looking forward to your research here, checking up on my claims. So once again, I invite you to push the pause button and think about your own behavior. What are you doing differently compared to, other situations where network publics wouldn't exist? What are you right now doing differently in your life, in your behavior, in your choices, in your information getting patterns and information sharing patterns? What are you doing differently because network publics exist? Because we have social media, because we have this kind of interconnected, huge global web. Because as Boyd stated pretty in the beginning of her article, these affordances, and the concept of affordance means that things are designed to do something. So if you think about Twitter, then Twitter's affordances tell you how long messages can you send, how they show up in other people's news feeds. There's this bunch of rules and kind of like guidelines and how things work and what they allow us to do. But these affordances are not fixed. It means that platforms can change, users can figure out like escape routes and things to do like in a different way. Like for example, the concept of threads and thread readers and all of that kind of stuff is a sign of people changing these original affordances. Or OnlyFans being a platform that was actually designed for like a very broad public, musicians, artists, and all of that, but now it's very much sexual, erotic, and pornographic content. So affordances were meant to be one, but then people came in and started to use it in a very different way. Obviously, not that clear cut, but yeah. So network publics have a lot of affordances from platform to platform, but as a structure too. But yeah, we're kind of good at twisting and turning things and making things in a different shape, into a different shape. But we cannot underestimate the power that structures have on us, how we start to follow them and how we start to think about, yeah, that's normal, right? So take a moment, think about What do you do differently? Because networked publics exist. Yeah, I'm not going to be really quiet here. You can create the quiet space for yourself. But here you could think about how, for example, let's take a really wild card. How stalking someone that you're romantically interested in has become kind of like a normal thing to do. So there are endless jokes about, haha, and then I stalked them. You know, like went back 3 years on their Instagram account and accidentally liked something, and then I was in panic, and everybody's like, yeah, I can relate totally. So how did this become the norm? Like, how did snooping on someone extensively and doing like this forensics, digital forensics kind of stuff as a cute thing to do? Because it is creepy, but we have grown more accustomed, and you know, it has become this norm that it's a thing that we do. Or how we're in dialogue with really powerful people. Like a school kid from Keila can be in dialogue with Toomas Hendrik Ilves, a former president of Estonia, because the communication structure allows it to happen. It could not happen without network publics. Or it could, but you know, it would be very hard. So once again, I would love to hear your examples because I'm probably stuck in my own head frame. But you know, let's bring them up in some other opportunities that we have. So yeah, talking about imagined others and imagined audiences, some couple of really useful concepts is one is imagined audiences, imagined communities, even a very well-established concept. But imagined audiences are the mental constructs of people who are in communication with us. So the other is always imagined. When you're writing a book, for example, you're thinking about the reader. When you're writing a press release, you're thinking about who might read it. If you're doing a TV news segment on something, you're probably thinking about how the viewer might see it. You know, the list goes on. Right now, I am imagining how you might be perceiving this. I might be completely off because I have no cues. I don't know if you are like there, like, who is this clown and why are they waving so much? Or like, this is not academic discussion. There is too much mimics and there is too much stuff going on. So I don't know. And that's the tricky part. I have to imagine you all. I can like think of a couple of people that I know from previous contacts, and I kind of build a pattern on these, but I have no idea who you are. I rely on my imagination of my previous experiences, how this course has been, how we usually talk about stuff, what kind of examples people usually do, how forgiving are they to hand waving, and so on and so on. But I don't know. So this is a very tricky situation, and we're in these situations constantly when we're talking about screen-mediated asynchronous communication, where you have no feedback. You have feedback later, but not at the time of communication. So if it's super hard to imagine the other when they are in front of you in communication at this moment, can you imagine how difficult it is mentally to accurately imagine the other in these kinds of settings? So invisible audiences in social media settings or digital platforms at large leave it pretty much to our imaginations. And we could go so wrong there. Like, think about examples from communication management or journalism or whatever your field of work is, because I know that dominantly we have communication management and journalism students here, but hello everybody else as well. But can you think of situations that have happened that you have heard of, that you have been a part of, where the sender of the message, the person who created this content, who wrote a comment somewhere, who tweeted something, who did a YouTube video, who sent an email, and they had modeled the ideal reader, the perfect recipient of this message, and they kind of overlooked all others, so that the message was really like tailored to a specific narrow segment of the whole public. And it was this ideal reader who got this message. But then there were all of these other people who could see it too. And then the conflicts and problems arise. It can be a work situation. It can be a personal, school-related, family-related situation where we have lots and lots of conflicts, and some are really serious because people get fired from their job, get harassed on a mass scale, or just, you know, get in conflict with their loved ones. But sometimes they are just like these negotiations of the norm. For example, I still remember the first time when in our student and faculty list in journalism and communication studies, a first emoji was used. So I think I even remember who sent it, but I also remember the discussions that went around it. It was like very long time ago. It was somewhere around 2004, 5 perhaps. And I know that one student wrote to the emailing list and they put a smiley there. Not the yellow one, but you know, the text-based. And I remember that there was this whole kind of, wow, is this academic enough? Is this what we do now? And I could see that the student was already a part of these communicative spaces where smileys were okay, to kind of, you know, give a hint about the tone of the written text. But in this communicative space of emailing list of university, it wasn't a thing yet. So there was this negotiation of the norm. And now you've probably gotten emails from your study manager or your lecturer that has tons of emojis and smileys and all of that kind of stuff there. So as you can see, the norm has changed. But in the beginning, the ideal readers were the ones who were used to all of these emojis, and the nightmare readers were all other people. And it was shock. People were shocked about, oh, where is the language going these days? Is this the beginning of the end? And I'm laughing at it because I was a part of this. I was like, this is not cool. That repertoire is not a part of this kind of communicative space. And now I'm laughing at myself. But to go further, the question is, who am I talking to? And whether you're writing a piece, a journalistic piece, or you're doing a communication campaign, or just posting stuff about life and all of the things that are in your life on social media, we tend to post and create for specific people who are referred to as ideal audiences, and they are the mirror image of us. So it's probably easier, everything like goes smoother if we just agree that we're all egomaniacs. Like our worlds revolve very much around ourselves. Even altruistic stuff that we do revolves around the good feeling that we get from doing good stuff. Like, I know that it's a cynical view of things and human beings, but it's super easy. It's so much easier to move beyond, you know, communication ABCs if we take a moment to admit that we are pretty narcissistic in our essence. So whenever we're communicating, we're also very often from the gut feeling, the first choices, the tone of it, the main message, the words that we use, the visuals that we use, how we frame everything. It is meant to talk to people like you. Even if you're trying to think about, different audiences and target groups, you're still communicating mostly to people like yourself. That's the joy of ideal audiences. People who are like you, who get the jokes, who appreciate the tone, who think that this amount of smileys was just enough and not too much, who kind of share similar values, cultural values, who think in a similar way, understand all of the references to history, to contemporary culture, to pop media, all the books that you have read, they have read, and there's this understanding. So, for example, Alessandro Nani, who defended his PhD thesis a couple of years ago in Tartu University and now teaches at Tallinn University. He did his thesis on the imagined audiences, not just that, but lots and lots of different stuff as well, but also imagined audiences of people who create audiovisual professional media, like, for example, TV series and so on. And he also found out that they create for themselves. They might have a task to think about different people, but in the end, we create for people like us. Because it's just so much easier to think about, to imagine people who are like you. But sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes, very often, if we're active on social media, we come across people who are very different from you, who are mirroring opposite life worlds, and they are a part of different publics, and they have a different upbringing and a cultural background, and they understand the world differently, and they have a different sense of humor. And, yeah, I don't think I have to go on. And they are referred to as nightmare audiences or nightmare readers for, the verbal kind of text. So nightmare audiences are very different from us. And also, they very often hold some kind of power over us. It can be physical power or psychological or work-related, or, there's many kinds of power, as you probably know already. So these nightmare audiences, for example, for teenagers, are very often parents, teachers, police, and in other cultures, in Estonia, not so much, but for example, in the United States, religious leaders of communities. So they tend to be the people who hold some power and might have a different view on things. So I have conducted quite a lot of research on teenagers. That's why I'm so quick with these examples. But also people who have seen a stupid joke that you made on Twitter, and next they are in your admissions board, for example, for some project, or you want to go into a master's degree program, or you want to go to a new job, and they are the decision makers there. So they might become these nightmare audiences. Also, the whole concept of cancel culture that we're going to come back to is built on nightmare audiences, that people understand certain norms differently, and these nightmare audiences can come in mass and just like execute this huge symbolic informational power over you by just flooding you and shaming you and making you a pariah in certain communities. So there's lots of different types of nightmare audiences, but very often we see that the nightmare audiences are disconnected from time and space, which means that a stupid post, a YouTube video, a tweet that you made 15 years ago, now we operate on these scales even, so let's say 10 years ago, could blow up in your face today, 10 years later. And people would be like, ooh, you really did tweet that? Okay, you're a bad person. So doesn't have this kind of time dimension tied to it. And also space. Something that is okay in Estonia is not okay in Iran, or something that is okay in Ukraine is not okay in Russia, for example. So these contexts are, we take stuff out of their original context and we make decisions based on our own life worlds. So that's what makes it really hard to follow contextual integrity, has been coined as a term by Helen Nissenbaum, who is one of the privacy scholars. She has written so much great stuff that if you're into privacy issues and also this kind of how can we protect people's independence and their reputation, and just, you know, how does privacy work in online information societies, Nissenbaum is your girl there. So she talks about contextual integrity, which means that every piece of information is tied to a very specific contextual elements that have to be taken into consideration when making a value judgment or like a normative judgment about something. We don't do that. We're like, I don't care. This is entertainment for me, very often in shaming cases and canceling cases, or we're just like really quick in our judgments because ain't nobody got time for that. That's the sad, cold truth of it. We make snap judgments based on these really like tiny pieces of information, no contextual integrity, because that's how our monkey brains operate. That's how stereotypes work. We are meant to make up our mind really quickly in order to survive in this really heavily overloaded world. Participation points come from here. So please, without repeating the examples that I have just given, and I'm going to give some more later on. So if you could, please don't use these as well, but write down on paper right now a couple of examples where you have noticed specific cases where you have noticed that nightmare audiences have come into play. So somebody posted something, somebody created some sort of content, and they didn't think about the nightmare audiences, and then all hell broke loose. Something like awful happened, something that has a negative effect on the case hero's life. So try to think about it. It's a follow-up from the previous think for yourself moment. Yeah, I'm not going to be quiet once again. You can pause me if you want to. There's plenty cases that have been covered in our traditional media, news media over the years. The first cases that I can track back are from, I don't know, 2010, 7 even. So there's lots. There's like historical cases. 2007 might be like a historical case now, but also probably also from the 90s. 92 we got internet in Estonia, you know, widely available, but still very unavailable for like economical or technological knowledge kind of reasons. Pioneer communities got on online in the 90s, but let me remind you that social media bubble did not happen really before 2005, six, I think the year was, where Facebook and everything took off. Obviously, they were created a bit earlier, often, and lots of like niche local social networking sites were in action. But the kind of the huge explosion took place in 2006, I think, is the medium. Once again, you're welcome to check me. I kind of remember, but I haven't checked for it right now. So take these cases, write them in Moodle after we have gotten through the rest of it, okay? But keep the paper that you just used and written down your initial thoughts about a case where somebody posted something, somebody created some sort of content, and they meant the ideal audience to get it, but actually nightmare audiences got it, and something negative happened to that person because of that nightmare audience coming into action. So here are a couple of examples, which some of you are going like, oh, you took my example. Then please try to think about another one, or, you know, I ain't that mad if you really actually thought about something like that. So some really huge cases appeared during the Zoom times that we're still somewhat in. But I'm sure that Estonians know about Tarmo Kruusimägi, our member of parliament, who was supposed to say something in a Zoom meeting that they had, which was public, but he was smoking an e-cigarette in bed and listening to, I think it was Kino or something like that, like good music, but still very inappropriate in that setting. Even more inappropriate was this case where Jürgen Ligi, who is a high-scale prominent politician, was caught on camera without their pants on. Also, stuff happening in the wide world, like here, somebody doesn't have their top on, or Jeffrey Toobin from New Yorker who masturbated on a Zoom call. So I would say that this is not a matter of nightmare audiences, but rather it's a matter of basic digital literacies. Yep, and that's all I'm going to say about that. But we have slowly moved towards this topic, and if we think about networked, structure-centered perspective, and we think about cancel culture, then yep, the structure is there to support what is often referred to as cancel culture. I'm saying this with a salty face, because cancel culture as an academic term is not a good one. First, it has been spoiled. People are using cancel culture as an ideological tool, as a tool to kind of propagate one's own worldview in a political setting. So if somebody is criticizing something or someone based on what they have actually done and saying that this is not okay, people are yelling, oh, cancel culture, one can't do anything these days because it's cancel culture and the snowflakes are coming. You know, you've heard that. That's first reason. Secondly, it has become so vague that people talk about like really, really different stuff under cancel culture, and also the fact of the culture. Is it really a culture? Like, does it have the culture dimensions that some who have a background in culture studies might notice? And also, is it canceling? Because canceling means like, no more. How many of these people who have been canceled actually are canceled? Are they missing from public life? Are they not having a job anymore? I'm talking about like really prominent people. And very often they're not canceled, right? They just get public attention, a slap on the wrist, perhaps, but they're not cancelled. So it's not cancel culture. But let's go and dive in. So cancel culture, I would prefer the term mass online shamings, perhaps. There are better ones. There is a character assassination, sorry, English leaving me. There is also terms of, yeah, I have put some here as well. Online firestorms for the less academically kind of difficult languages. But I think that the essence is shaming. It's a norm contestation. So there are two groups who understand how the world should work in a different way. So one thinks that blackface is okay. One thinks that, nope, it's not. And they have a fight. And that's what's happening. But it's very often framed as a cancel culture, that you are trying to cancel something that has been an important part of our lives. So that's where this kind of cancel word comes in. But very often it's just an argument about how social life should be organized. It's a heated debate around social justice. It's a heated debate around social norms. And when we get to the like a bit nearer to the cancel culture essence, then we're actually talking about shaming. We're talking about these rituals that people do in order to tell people that this is not okay what you're doing here. Shaming is not a new thing, right? So I'm sure that you can think about like historical examples where people have turn to extrajudicial means to get justice. So you could have a legal framework. So you could fine someone or put them in jail, you know, these kinds of measures for sanctioning. But you can also have ways of sanctioning that are not that formal. And that's probably what's happening in cancel culture. So in essence, what we're trying to do is we're trying to influence the onlookers of this situation, but also the offender to change their behavior. So we have written a little bit about this, which is why I'm not going into this in too much detail. If you're interested, you can write about it. It's very messy. I don't have the full answers to you, but this kind of online shaming practices that we are engaging nowadays, and we think that these shaming practices are normal. This has most definitely had an effect on our culture and our communication. So if you think about cancel culture, what pops into your head? You can pause for a moment and think about different platforms. Like, has there been any canceling activities on Facebook, on TikTok, on news media, on alternative news media, on Twitter? That seems to be the main ground of lots and lots of these online shaming campaigns. On Instagram, there are even specific pages, specific accounts that shame flight passengers who do not know how to behave, who shame influencers who are reckless in their consumption patterns. There are pages who are shaming influencers. One really good one is Influencers in the Wild on Instagram. And the page is basically showing you content of everyday people videoing, usually recording influencers who are recording their content. So it's this kind of, you know, backstage, front stage mirror world, crazy house, where I would go on a street, see an influencer who was doing the TikTok dance, and I would be filming them doing the TikTok dance. And then I would send it in to this Influencers in the Wild account, and they would show it. Because let's be honest, it looks ridiculous if you're doing like 3 takes of a specific dance or like, yeah, you know, you can imagine that. Go check it out. So these are also a part of cancel culture scene, one could argue, because they are trying to ridicule, to undo specific cultural behaviors. But I'm sure that you have also very different examples. So if we would try to map them on a whiteboard, we would probably end up with something that would be all over the place. Like, is it for fun? Is it just for laughs? Or is it to actually change the offender's behavior? Is it confrontational? Is it like, I'm calling you out and naming and shaming you? Or is it just like, you know, this kind of, oh, here's a video that I took 2 years ago of this really terrible bus driver. They're never gonna see it, right? Or is it something that is being done in a small group, or is it like a mass thing? Is there a historical timeline? Did this happen now? Or is it something that is being punished for the past behaviors? There is so many dimensions that we could map, and that is also the core problem with it. There's so much. It's not just cancel culture. There's like very different domains of what's happening. So, for example, I have one sortiment of different cases here. Here is the Reaper Man is coming for you meme, which was widely used on Twitter because people got into these heated arguments and debates and just like yelling at each other. And we made up our mind that, yep, they're a creep. Yep, they're a dumbass. They don't know what they're doing. And this kind of like quick, I'm gonna unfollow you. Let's cancel this and cancel that, cancel him and cancel her and cancel they and cancel, you know, whoever. And well, yeah, Estonian Twitter especially is pretty lively space in that sense. But also we've had arguments about should we cancel singers that have gone a bit right radical? Should we cancel people who are in radio stations working as hosts and saying inappropriate things? They are still working there, nothing happened to them, they're not actually cancelled. If you don't know what I'm talking about, then here is an emoji, social steganography. Social steganography is a secret language, basically. If you can't say something up front, you invent code for it, you invent another symbol for it. So, are you feeling clever, Estonians? Who is this person that I'm talking about? I'm pretty sure that you already got it. It's Alari Kivisaar, who was really trigger happy about suing people. So that's why Estonian Twitter community started to talk about him in a coded way, so that he and his legal representatives could not find the content. So it was coded to protect the person who was trying to talk about this. So this became a symbol for Alari Kivisaar. I'm pretty sure that you can guess, Estonians, who this is. It's a famous lifestyle fitness influencer of Estonia who was called Paljas Porgand, Naked Carrot, and also was very active on social media sites. And that's why people kind of invented, no, not invented, it was a really easy code, but they started to use the carrot emoji for that. And here we have a lovely unicorn who is representing who? It's a famous lawyer who is suing everybody. So yeah, once again, it's a secret language code for Robert Sarv, who is one notorious and very high profile legal professional who is involved in lots and lots of cases that have to do with these cancel culture cases, and also is a bit problematic, let's be honest. If you're interested, go have a little check. Here are several more. If you know them, then you know them. If you don't, then it's okay. You don't have to know about everything. But just to get your attention to this one, because that's a classic. That's the one for the handbooks. Is the Justine Sacco case, who was a communication PR officer of a huge corporation, and she went on a vacation on, what year was it? Was it 2013? I thought it was earlier. Okay, then it wasn't that long ago. But Justine Sacco tweeted this as a joke, as this kind of joke on stupid white people who are really ignorant about Africa and about social issues and about diseases and everything. Obviously, Poe's law kicked in, which means that if you don't make it explicitly clear that you're joking, people are not going to decode it as a joke. So lots of people thought that, holy guacamole, Justine Sacco is a really stupid white lady. And they didn't get that it was a joke. So she went on a plane, turned off her phone, and then 8 or 12 hours later, when the plane landed, her whole life was gone in that sense. Because people had started an online witch hunt, shaming her, contacting her job, and people, her employers. They found out where she lived. They spread the word of there was a trending hashtag, has Justine landed yet? Which meant that people were kind of like wanting the drama. Like, have you already seen that we have ruined your life, you stupid white lady? And it was a tragic case. If you want to know more about it, then there's an awesome book about it. It's a book by John Ronson, and it's called So You Have Been Shamed. So You've Been Publicly Shamed. And it's a great overview of these initial huge cases that also inhibit this kind of separate space. So because if we compare these different things that we see here, they have similarities, but they're really different. So it's this mishmash. And I would really appreciate if for your final thesis or your final essay or for whatever, you could perhaps come up with typology of all of these things that we tend to call cancel culture and give them actual descriptions and actual names. I'd love to read that. Here are some more notorious cases. That is the persistence, replicability, scalability questions are in action. For example, Teen Vogue's new editor, well, not new editor, but at the moment, I was a year ago or so, there was this new editor being hired or promoted, and then they found old tweets that were quite kind of racist, let's say, and she was fired over really old tweets. So once again, I invite you to do some soul searching and think about yourself as a teenager. And what kind of stuff did you say? Write to perhaps your diary or a blog or to group chats on MSN, perhaps? Or I don't know how old you are, so I don't make these references out of nowhere. But if I think back of the stuff that I have done and said and written and so on, it was very stupid at times, very inconsiderate. Empathical levels of action were really low. But I was blessed with keeping it analog mostly. So there are traces of my stupidity, but they're not on Twitter, for example. But the generations of today are growing up with these growing pains all laid out, all screenshotted, all kind of stored somewhere. So I think that our main goal now is to learn to forgive, in a sense, because the newer, younger generations who have had social lives, in online settings, they are gonna have some really bad stuff out there. And if we judge them based on that, like the worst thing that you ever did is gonna be the first on Google, we're gonna end up with like lots and lots of broken people and lots and lots of people who are expelled from opportunities and systems and groups. So it's this kind of philosophical question about how do you learn to forgive if you have everything, all the worst things that people have done are put in front of you like that. How do you overlook it and say that, okay, yet they were, but not anymore? So it's this whole new societal kind of right to be forgotten, right to be erased even from the history, digital footprint history point of view. Sorry, my English is slowly going away. So this is a sign that I should wrap it up. Some more examples from the Estonian media about how cancel culture has been talked about. If you haven't read them, and if you can speak Estonian or have an amazing translate program attached, then these are pretty good, especially the Müürileht one. I really enjoyed, and I think that Henry Kõiv did an amazing job in getting the basics down. But shaming is a social sanctioning. I want to get back to this. Like, let's get rid of the cancel culture talk, and let's talk about shaming. So usually shaming is, if we shame people, we want two things to happen. We want the offender and all the others who are onlookers to understand that something has been done in a wrong way, in a way that we don't really like. We're shaming you in order to make you understand that you have been incorrect in your behavior. Please understand that, correct your behavior, and then we welcome you back to our community. So this is referred to as reintegrative shaming. Then there are other types of shamings where we are saying, you have done some bad stuff that we don't like, but the stuff has been so bad that we don't want you with us anymore. So shame, 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 go away. Wow, I'm making nursery rhymes here. So shame and expel, like go away, shun you. We don't want to see you anymore. You have to go live on an island, and you have to be seen only in the dark, and like you can have no contact with anyone, and everybody's going to spit on you and stuff like that. So this is disintegrative shaming. And when we talk about cancel culture, then very often the mind goes to disintegrative, because canceling someone is like, go away from us. When in actuality, we are not doing disintegrative shaming, but we're usually doing reintegrative shaming. We're trying to say that, hey, let's negotiate. This is not cool what you're doing. Like, please make yourself better and then come back to us. We will forgive you. But in our studies, we have seen that this is not the whole case. And there's a lot of shaming that has been happening and is happening because of very different motives. So very often, like usually shaming is a part of trying to make the offender understand something. But in online spaces, the offender is not actually the target, the recipient of the messages, but rather they don't ever get to see the shaming. It's done in semi-anonymous spaces. It's done in really close silo social places, filter bubble kind of way, right? Echo chambers. So this motive behind the shaming activities is a bit different. Let me give you an example. So if you are a lady, if you are usually a female, a girl, woman. Obviously, it goes beyond gender. We're not talking about binary gender here. Similar harassment can happen to men or people who are non-binary, but very, very dominantly, it's a matter of being woman and being a woman in online spaces. So it is a heavily gendered issue. We can argue about this if you want to, and I can come up with proof that it is. So several thousands of studies show that. So somehow, somewhere, a part of our human culture became convinced that this kind of interactions are okay. It's like a normal thing. So they function as a way to vocalize frustration, to play on like power relations. They are just for laughs, I'm joking. There is like this kind of playfulness, dark playfulness in them, but also they are highly disturbing. These are not even the worst ones, as you might know. And this became like the norm for women, the cost of women being online, as it's been referred to. So basically, it's saying, suck it up, deal with it. It's the internet, people. Like, you shouldn't be surprised that you get these kinds of messages if you're a woman and on like very specific dating apps or something like this. Comes with the territory. Very many people are saying that no, actually, it shouldn't be the norm. Like, why have we accepted that this is okay? Because this is like violent threats of rape and death and, you know, just like harming everyone. This is not a joke, actually. Although we have begun to decode it as a joke and as a no big deal, like deal with it kind of way. So there are many different ways of how women have fought back and claimed some sort of DIY justice, do-it-yourself justice, which means that it's outside of the legal norms because women are feeling like they don't get support from the police, from the courts. So they have tried to figure out how to fight these things amongst themselves. You can check these things out by yourself. But we focused on Instagram pages that collect, share, and comment on screenshots, mostly screenshots, that depict men harassing women on online sites, very often dating apps and sex apps. So there is By Felipe, Tinder Nightmares, for example, and an Estonian one, Se pole okei. Lots and lots more, obviously. And these kinds of pages are often referred to as spaces of digital vigilantism or DIY justice. And they are very often built on online public shaming. Not the offender, because they are very often anonymized and not a part of these spaces, but they are using shaming as this kind of social sanctioning practice for everybody who is belonging to this group or has stumbled upon these kinds of contexts, so that people would learn from others' mistakes, in a sense. We have written an article about this that is also available in Moodle. So if you're interested, you can take part of this little ego trip here and go and read it, because I really do think that it's a very interesting study. It was initiated by our master's students, and we're really, really proud of where it got. So normalization of digilantism, something that this is okay. Yeah, this is entertainment. We follow these pages and we're like, oh my God, aren't they horrible? But pass the popcorn kind of way. So there is this huge movement of fighting back, like trying to get safety, trying to change the social norm, a negative norm, but the tool itself, the shaming, it can change the people who are involved in that. So you can read more from Jane, who is an author who has written lots about online harassment, and she has written like really, really great pieces. Once again, I'm everybody's hype girl here, right? So Jane, go read it. She has written lots and lots of cool stuff. So if you put in to Google Scholar or wherever you do your research, Emma E. Jane is her name. Jane, online harassment, you're good. There's going to be tons of stuff. But what we did is we analyzed 100 different posts from various similar pages and the comments that came with these posts. So there was around 1,300 comments, I think, and 100 posts. And we conducted, I think it was 8 interviews with the moderators, the administrators of these spaces. So it was a quantitative plus qualitative kind of research design, and we found out some interesting stuff. Of course, obviously the gut feeling was there, but we found out that, yep, there is reintegrative and there is disintegrative shaming going on, but there is so much more. Like, for example, we constructed 5 different types of shamings. First one is pedagogic shaming. So people who are engaging in this type of shaming, they are feeling the need to change the norm. Reintegrative shaming, right? Just another name for it. So, for example, people are saying that this is not cool, this should be changed, and I want you to see how this is wrong and how this is making people feel bad. And, you know, that kind of teacher's view of things. So you can put it on pause and read the first one. The instructors was a name that we used for members of this community in the comment section. So about 12% of the comment section's comments were in this type, that were trying to kind of shame in a pedagogical way. So do it like that, and then they don't matter to you anymore. They can do no harm that way. But also, like, really, really, like, this is how you should behave. And it was very often aimed at the community, not the offender. But also moderators. Moderators have felt the need that they have to teach stuff to their community and also to the people who are depicted in these screenshots. The second one is denunciatory shaming, which is most likely the disintegrative shaming, where we named the moderators as judges and the members of this community as angry mobbers. And angry mobbers are the ones who really want the names, and they want to go real life. So going real life means that this is not going to be this magical circle where these rules of play apply in online spaces, but they want to find these guys. They want to do real damage. So that's why it's very often it's kind of problematic, the most problematic. And around 20% of all comments are like that. They want to see some real life kind of effect on these offenders. And sometimes the moderators also say that sometimes they seek outside help. Like, for example, when there are kids involved, and that's when they give all the information away to, for example, the police, which can then take on different kinds of sanctionings. Then there is recreational shaming, which means that very many people are participating in these shamings because they're fun, because of entertainment. They don't want anything to change. They don't want necessarily people to understand that they have behaved wrong or something like this, but they are rather like searching for drama as entertainment. And very often it is about the release, dealing with trauma through humor. So as moderator 4 put it, if you don't laugh at these things, you'll cry. So they make lots and lots of fun about these situations, and they turn it into a joke. Then, and that's the most important, I think, is the participatory shaming. People are engaged in shaming because they want to belong. They don't care too much about what's going to happen to the offender or what's happening, but they just want to be a part of this us group. And I'm seeing this very much in very many different places where we're talking about cancel culture or just like this kind of mass online shamings. So very often participatory shaming means, from the moderator's view, that they are setting up spaces where there's this shared experience, this kind of safe space in a way, where they can, belong somewhere. They can belong into this kind of commiserating group of people who are seeing that something is wrong and reinforcing to each other that, yep, this is not normal. So they are finding this kind of support in this shaming activities. And also bringing in others, like other members to that. And come on, hey, we've been talking about this. See, there's this whole group who is talking about this. So belonging and this social elements of shaming as a practice come into play. And then one thing that I would love to like think about in depth more is that there seems to be this motive of reflecting shaming as well, or reflective shaming. So people are not necessarily even trying to fix something or change something or punish or form a community, but rather they are trying to make sense of the world, and they're trying to like mirror what they're seeing, not giving value judgments, trying to, stay away from the value judgments, but rather just mirroring, like a journalistic way, even sometimes, of all the things that human beings are doing. So they are perceiving themselves to be vessels, mere vessels of stuff that is happening outside. And also a self-reflection place. Like, why am I finding this to be bothersome? Where do I draw the lines between what is okay and what is not? Have I done something that could follow into these lines? Or am I being unjust here? So there is this kind of self-reflection, taste testing, kind of norm building within yourself function that is present in these spaces. But also vanity mirrors, people who are sending in stuff and they want to see their experience there so much that they get mad if these screenshots are not being used. So it's a matter of status symbol even to get your screenshot there. So it's very me motivated. So as you can see, usually shaming is talked about from what we want the offender to go through. Now we're seeing in these online spaces that, or platforms, I'm saying spaces a lot, sorry. We're seeing that it's us oriented. Let's build something. Let's be in this together. And then there's this emerging of like norm testing, like personal, intrapersonal work, so that you're trying to figure out yourself and your place in the world. Sorry, I got carried away. I really love this study, so I can talk about this a lot. But so what? Like, okay, why are we talking about this? One of the effects that could come from all of this shaming and cancel culture and all this kind of network publics, refracted publics, is social cooling or chilling effect, that we are going to censor ourselves so much that we become these little box people who are afraid to do anything that goes beyond the norm, the very strict norm, and thus the culture, the self-expression, the communication becomes this, kind of boring. Let's say it like that. The color goes out of it. People won't be able to express themselves, fearing the outrage, fearing the entertainment-driven shaming, or just like things are going to get much quieter and much more boring. Or the other side is arguing that we are entering a post-shame society, that all of this barrier shaming that is taking place and this cancel culture, once again with the quote marks, right? It's driving us towards having a really thick skin and a short memory. So what that you have done horrible things? This is this kind of forgiveness is the light side of it, but the dark side of it is post-shame, which means that you can do horrible stuff and still be there like, no, I didn't. Choose me, elect me as your leader, please. So not please, usually it's more forceful. So this kind of post-shame society, are we already there? Like, some people are saying that whole Trumpism has been built on the concept of having no shame, having no regrets, right? So this is something that I don't have answers, but rather I'm seeing that there are these two camps forming. One that is seeing that we're gonna self-censor a lot and it's gonna get quiet, or it's gonna get more loud, more horrible, more, just like outrageous. The war over our eyeballs is gonna get so much worse, and we're entering an era of what is happening? Just some comforting words as well. We have been talking about how everything is public and everything is falling to the eyes and ears and fingertips of, you know, nightmare audiences. There are plenty of opportunities to reclaim privacy, and don't post anything is not the only option, but rather you can use social steganography, the secret languages, sometimes also called as dog whistles or Voldemorting, the one whose name you cannot say. So you invent new names, a way, you know, this kind of detour of how to talk about things, sending ambiguous messages, and, you know, you have to have a certain interpretive lens to understand stuff. Also, data obfuscation, which is more of a technical term, where you don't want to be profiled, you don't want to be this type of person, so you mix it up. You use plugins and you use like specific personal strategies of how to make things blurry for the profiling pages and platforms and third parties and whatnot. So you're sending out false information about yourself to make the truth hide in that. So for example, Track Me Not plugin, I don't know if it's still working. I used to use it, but then I quit for some reason. I can't even remember. Well, Track Me Not, what it does is it just sends out random stuff about you, like you would be Googling whales, onions, I don't know, snails, random stuff. Also, data obfuscation is happening naturally. For example, for journalists, I've noticed that journalists search engines and like search patterns are really random, because on one day you're writing about giraffes and another day you're writing about the building of a port or something, and you need to get intact and informed about stuff. And shift of responsibility, where the sender of the message is not at fault, but rather the coder of the message is at fault when we talk about things that are offensive. So it's this kind of psychological defense mechanism. We will probably talk about this somewhere along the way. So now, to sum it all up, an hour and a half has passed, so it is time to wrap it up. So we have been talking about lots of spaces that are kind of hidden, but not really. These publics that are visible to the eye, that can look, you can stumble upon them. And I invite you to think about the opportunities, but also the risks that come with below the radar characteristics of refracted publics. So on the one side, you would have the potential to hide, right? So you want to be hidden from certain people, certain groups, certain institutions. But also it means that you are undiscoverable for many who might be interested and need you to be there. So it's not to say that one term is good and the other one is bad, or one term is useful and the other one is not, but rather all of these characteristics and these kind of descriptives can be used for good and for bad, and they are all like potential opportunities, but also potential risks. It depends on the viewpoint. And I'm sorry that I can't be any clearer, because I know that it's maddening when you don't have clear answers, but it's like, it could be this, it could be that, but it is how it is. So take time to really think through, what do these characteristics mean? How do they show up in online spaces that you inhibit, where you are moving around? So is there this kind of transience? Like, for example, if you're an Instagram user or a Snapchat user, you probably know this, that stuff is there one moment and then it's not. You can save it, but it can disappear if you miss it out. Also think about when you have discovered something that is interesting, when you have struggled to decode something that you wanted to understand but didn't really? And are you a part of these silo socialities? So try to think them really through. Aha, I'm sorry, I do have some more slides, but just to spark your interest, to read further, once again in Moodle, we have the files ready for you. And Karel Lott is a student of ours, a former student of ours, who did a very cool study on Facebook shaming groups. So if you didn't know, there is a whole scene of huge groups. Like perhaps you can see that That's It, I'm Lipstick Shaming group has 124,000 people. So it's a mass group. And the most popular ones are actually things that have to do with weddings. So there can be like 600,000 people and so on. If you want to, you can pause. We have done the analysis of shaming groups and try to figure out what are people shaming in these entertainment groups. And there is very big variety of things. The most popular ones were that you have made or you own something weird, and then we're there to make fun of it as a whole in the group. So really weird spaces. If you haven't seen them, if you're curious, go and check them out. And participating in these groups has a set of rules that we also try to analyze and kind of make into categories. So you can check these out later on if you want to. I'm always pushing the wrong buttons here. And hashtag checking is just it's a practical tip that I would like to give you today. Whenever you're coming up with, like, let's say that you're designing a communication strategy or a communication campaign, or you're trying to build a social movement, or you're trying to do something, then be prepared that your original ideas can be taken over. Sometimes for political reasons, like we have hashtag checking cases where human rights issues, gun carrying rights versus other people's right to live, and so on, have been at the heart, like really serious things where certain hashtags have been hijacked. Like one of the really old ones is where McDonald's tried to get people to talk about McDonald's online and tell them, like, how did McDonald's play a role in somewhere significant in your life? And they tried to start this hashtag MacD stories. And then people started to post really weird stuff about the horrible food that they have gotten, the worms that they have found in their salads, the mistreatment of employees that they have witnessed, and all of these kind of really negative things about McDonald's. So they did the hashtag jacking activities. It was a really old case, I remember. NYPD had similar, where police violence was actually brought into attention instead of feel-good stories about the neighborhood Bobby. But I'm sure that you can also think about cases where you have started for like professional reasons or whatever, a hashtag public, and then somebody took it over as a coordinated wave, usually, because people are egging each other up and they're like, yeah, let's do this. But that's a really good example of both network publics and refracted publics. And this is where I leave you. I invite you to think about, how is this a part of network publics? Hashtag checking as a practice. And also, how is this at the same time a practice of refracted publics? Because there are elements of both. If you don't know about this, then I urge you to look further. And also, we will probably talk about this somewhere. Like if it's not in the next seminars that we will have together, it's going to be at another class or at a institute party or somewhere like that, because I really like these topics. If you didn't notice. So please post in Moodle to get today's points, the task about nightmare audiences and specific cases. I hope that you have found this to be helpful for your academic journey, but also perhaps your professional journey, which can also overlap, or your personal journey as well. So thank you for staying with me, bearing with me, and we will see hopefully in a couple of weeks already. Bye.